I'm Sam Alford, and welcome back to the Pop Instincts page on YouTube. Okay, in the last video, I was going through my record collection, and as you can see back here, there's a lot to go through, but we're not going to go through all of it today. Actually, what we're focusing on today is the second batch of records involving the band Kiss. And in the last video, we went through their makeup years, and this time we will go through their non-makeup years and give you a little history on them as well. So we stopped at Creatures of the Night, which was the last official Kiss album to feature the band in full makeup. There had been talks for a while, and they were kicking around the idea: do we take off the makeup? Do we dare? Will the fans still listen to us? Will we sound the same? Bunch of crazy ideas, but there were legit concerns. The last show that they did in makeup was Rio de Janeiro in 1983, and by this point they had a new guitarist in the form of Vinnie Vincent, and he had makeup. He was the pharaoh, the Egyptian Ankh, I believe, as it were, and that was his personality, I guess. That's the reason behind their makeup. It was supposed to tell a story about them. Anyway, so soon thereafter they took off the makeup, and they did it on MTV. J.J. Jackson introduced Kiss to the world without makeup, and they were promoting their new album at the time, Lick It Up. Now, this also features, like I said, Eric Carr, who had joined them previously on their album Music from the Elder. And so this is a chance to at least see two of the original members without makeup, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, along with Eric Carr and the newest guitarist, Vinnie Vincent. Vinnie Vincent, by all accounts, was a very talented guitarist, but Gene once said he was the most self-destructive person he had ever met. They were coming into the 80s by filming videos for MTV. They had already filmed a video from the Creatures of the Night album, and this time they really broke into it, and they got into it and had hits with the songs Lick It Up and All Hell's Breaking Loose. And that they both had these post-apocalyptic type feels and in them, and just a bunch of chicks hanging around, the band, and they were having some fun with it. I especially like when Paul was learning how to use a sword, and Gene Simmons would just kind of shake his head and have to walk away from him. But anyway, this was the first look at the band, and they felt that this was the best move to make at the time because they were seen as passé and they needed to make a change. And you don't get too much more of a change than taking off the famous Kiss makeup. This tour is pretty successful. This was the start of a successful run for the band. I know you can hear it in my voice. It's not the old Kiss. No, it's not. But it's not 1974 anymore. It's 1983. They followed this album up, Lick It Up, with this record, Animalized. And Vinnie Vincent was already gone from the band by the time this LP came out, and they had new guitarist Mark St. John. If you can see him up at the top of the photo here in the back, Mark was a talented guitarist, but by this time Kiss was almost officially Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley's name on the contracts. Eric Carr once remarked that everybody else were just hired guns, and Mark was exactly that. Mark could, everybody at the time was emulating Eddie Van Halen. Very fast guitar, playing. He actually trained guitarists as well. So the guy, he was a student, and he knew what he was doing, and he did exactly what was asked of him. And so for some, it doesn't really seem like Mark was an official member. He didn't have his own personality. He was kind of a hired gun, as they say. Mark toured with Kiss, and then he developed writer syndrome. He only did a couple of shows with them, and his arm started to swell up, and his hands were swollen, and he couldn't play guitar. So Bruce Kulick, the brother of Bob Kulick, who had played with Kiss before, was brought on to perform the concerts, do the shows with them, and wound up permanently joining the band. Heaven's on Fire, huge song from this album, and one of the most popular songs of the 1980s. They had an Animalized uncensored home video that was made that was released. I do believe that they eventually released that on record overseas, so I don't have that one. But anyway, just a little piece of history there. Move on to 1985 and Asylum, and they have almost as much makeup on this album as they did back in the 70s, albeit it's red and green and blue and things like that, blush, Rogue. You see the inside of the record here. This record, you can see some snapshots of the band. Eric and Paul on this side, and Gene and Bruce on this side. Big songs from this album. Tears Are Falling, All Night. Songs like that. I remember my brother listening to this record, and he said, but they all sound alike. All the songs sound alike. A lot of things in the 80s did. And by this point, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were producing the album. And as you can see here in the corner, it's cut out. And this is what's known as a cutout album. That means that this was a record that didn't sell as much, and so they cut a little chunk out of it, and you might see it in some of your records, and they sold it for a discounted price. So the album was successful, but not like they once were. Still a good effort. Moving on to 1987, an album I really liked, Crazy Nights. And the album cover, one of my all-time favorite album covers, is just a really awesome shot of the four members of KISS. At the time, Bruce Kulick, full-time member, he joined on the last album, Asylum, officially, and he is on this album. And a pretty good look on the inside of what KISS looked like in 1987. Crazy Crazy Nights, one of the most famous songs from this album, and Reason to Live, which was a bit of a ballad, and it was gaining a lot of traction on MTV, on Dial-In TV at the time, and for some reason it just stopped. People just stopped requesting it, and they'd already moved on, and the album didn't go on much further from there. Paul Stanley was pretty much spearheading KISS in the 80s. Gene was off doing movies, and he had his hands full with a lot of other stuff. He wanted to discover other bands and other women and stuff like that, and he didn't really pay attention to what was going on in the band, and he credits Paul with getting the band through the 1980s. This is very, very slick, very, some might say, overproduced. Some people didn't like the sound. Also, I believe it was Anthrax that opened for KISS on some of the dates on this Crazy Nights tour. And I don't think they were a good fit. They were big fans of KISS, but the music that they were doing was what the audience was more in tune with than what KISS was actually doing. And the next KISS album came out in 1988, and it was Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. And I actually don't have this record. I had a chance to buy it, but it's one that I just didn't really want in my collection. This was another greatest hits package, which I understand. If they were still gaining new fans at the time, and longtime fans might not have wanted to buy the album. They thought, why should I need it? I've got all these songs. Well, they put 2 new songs on the album. Let's Put the X in Sex and You Make Me Rock Hard. And looking back, Paul said, that's kind of a cheesy thing to be doing. What I didn't care for personally, I didn't mind those songs so much as Eric Carr was chosen to sing Beth, which was a song that was Peter Criss's song. And a lot of fans didn't take too kindly to that. And also the remixes. They were a bit, they took some songs that were really, classics in the KISS catalog, and they decided to remix them for the 80s and revamp them, and I didn't really think it was necessary at all. So that's an album that you will not be seeing in my collection. Next up, 1989's Hot in the Shade, and this is where the band feels like they were kind of getting back to where they needed to be. The 80s were ending, and they were kind of getting away from the overproduction. They still have big hairs you see here. I think this is the best the band looked in the 1980s, and that accounts for a lot, really, when a band, especially somebody like KISS, where it's visually important to see the group, you could see that they were all in great looking shape, and they just had this look about them, and I really like this era of KISS. So you see here on the front of the cover, when I turn it down, they had 15 new tracks, Hot in the Shade. As it was, KISS did not appear on the front cover of the album, but you have a Sphinx, which they nicknamed Leon. Get it? Leon Sphinx. When they went on the Hot in the Shade tour, they had this as part of the stage background. And a lot of big songs off this album. One of the biggest ones, of course, was one of their biggest ones of the 1980s, which was Forever, which was a song written by Michael Bolton. Yes, the Michael Bolton from Office Space. No, the singer Michael Bolton. Anyway, Hide Your Heart was interesting because this was a song that Ace Frehley also did, and he released on his album Trouble Walkin' this same year in 1989. So you could see that there was, even though they weren't working together, they still had something to do with each other. Then we move on to their 1992, and this is the album that got me into the band. I was a little late to the game by this point. This is the Revenge album. This is a reissue. I'm not sure how many copies exist of the original album because by the 90s, bands were hardly releasing anything on record. Okay, myself personally, I love this album because it's the first thing I ever won from a radio station. I answered a Kiss question and won tickets to a Kiss concert on this tour. Unfortunately, my friend who was supposed to take me got a deficiency in school. I didn't have a license, and I rode with another friend that had a piece of crap car, and we never made it. But anyway, I made up for it because I saw Kiss about 7 times since then. The previous year, they had released the song God Gave Rock and Roll to You. It was a cover song by a band called Argent, and it was on the Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey soundtrack, and it also was here on an extended version. I knew I had to have the record. Unholy was the first single to feature Gene Simmons in quite some time. So this was really a return to form, and featured Bob Ezrin producing, who gave us Kiss's arguably best album to a lot of fans, Destroyer, and arguably their worst, Music from the Elder. There were a lot of songs written for this record. Gene Simmons actually wrote a song with Bob Dylan. Gene says that Bob Dylan called him Mr. Kiss Man, I believe. And it never really saw the light of day. And there is a solo at the end of the album. As you noticed on the back cover, they have a new drummer, Eric Singer. Unfortunately, Eric Carr, who had been with the band since 1981's Music from the Elder, and actually joined them on their Australian tour the year previously, had died of heart cancer, which is just, it's one of those things that sounds so horrible, and you wonder that you haven't heard more of it. You don't hear people having heart cancer, but Eric got it pretty quick, and unfortunately he passed. But the final song on the LP is called Car Jam 1981, which was some old material, and it's kind of like a big, massive drum solo, and it salutes Eric Carr. This was also used on an Ace Frehley's Comet album, however. So this wasn't really exactly making its debut here, but it was in this form. 1993 saw the release of Alive 3, another LP that I don't actually have the vinyl version of. But it was a great album, and it was Kiss covering some of their 80s material. It was basically to promote the Revenge album, and they did have some really killer versions of some songs, but one of those would be kind of hard to find on record. Then we move up to the year 1995 and Kiss Unplugged, and this was an album that brought the original band back together. As you can see here, Kiss Unplugged album, or excuse me, MTV Unplugged albums were very successful. Unplugged started in 1989, and when Eric Clapton did his Unplugged session, it was so popular they were like, we've got to release this on CD, and he won Grammys for it. So then other acts followed suit, and as you see here and on the front of the cover, you had the current incarnation of Kiss with 2 original members. Ace Frehley and Peter Criss returned, and Kiss were doing Kiss conventions at this time. And what it was kind of like the conventions we know of these days, where people would crowd in and get a shot at looking at Kiss memorabilia, and they could buy things and things like that. And it's rumored to have started with Eric Singer suggesting, hey, why don't you get Peter Criss out there to sing with you or something? Well, the audience reaction went very well, and Kiss knew the time was right to get a reunion going, and this was kind of the precursor to it. This features some rare songs that weren't often performed in concert. Starting with Coming Home from the Hotter Than Hell album is the very first song on the LP, and getting Ace and Peter back on stage to join them for 2000 Man, Beth, Nothing to Lose, Rock and Roll All Night, and a bonus track, Got to Choose. So by 1996, the original 4 members of Kiss were back together and back on the road. And they were everywhere. They were every bit as big as they were in the 70s. This was for my generation or my timeline, my first chance to catch some of that madness and that mania that was going on, that was everything that was Kiss. And they released this LP, which isn't the easiest thing to find on record, which was You Wanted the Best, You Got the Best. And this features some old Kiss classics, Some that were, as I found out after the fact, were kind of reworked and a lot of overdubs, and it's not purely, this is not a bootleg recording, trust me. A lot of it was studio work. And speaking of studio, there's actually an interview with that's supposed to be on this record with Jay Leno. Yes, Kiss Tells All, and that was side B of the second record. And Jay Leno is just talking with Kiss about the reunion and being back together. And finally, that brings us to this album, Psycho Circus. And this was the Kiss reunion album that everybody thought that they were waiting for. You can see the cover if we kind of move it around. And this is a better look at what the cover is actually supposed to look like. And this was Gene, Paul, Ace, and Peter back in the studio. And Bruce Fairbairn, who found a lot of success producing Aerosmith's Pump, was asked to work on this album. And looking back, Gene and Paul admit that Bruce really didn't have an idea of where Kiss was really at. Kiss wanted to kind of do away with the songs about, you know, getting chicks and stuff like that for this record. And I appreciate that. They did songs about anthems and coming together and things. They had some really great songs like We Are One and You Wanted the Best and Raise Your Glasses and things like that. However, amongst the Kiss community, and remember this is before everybody had a computer and certainly well before smartphones, the Kiss Army was starting to figure out through rumors that Ace and Peter didn't really play on this album much, and I think they took exception to that. And the album started out pretty hot, and so did the tour, but things were starting to wind down at that point. And speaking of winding down, we're getting to that point where we wind down here. I thank you for watching this video as we went through my Kiss record collection. I don't say that I have every record that they ever put out, but this is a substantial amount that kind of takes us up to the end of the reunion. And, you know, I've always appreciated buying records, and it's neat to look at them, as you can see here. You know, that's something you don't get with streaming music. You don't get to really look at the artwork unless you go to Google. So there's something about holding a record in your hand and getting to look at it and such like that. And I hope I gave you a sense of what that was about with this YouTube video. And if you like what you see, I would really appreciate it if you tell your friends about it, like it, subscribe to the Pop Instincts channel here on YouTube. Share the video if you check out popinstincts.com, which is the official website, and the Instagram page and Facebook, and even the eBay page. This is just me kind of sharing what I have and my knowledge of pop culture with others that might get a kick out of it. I know it's not going to appeal to everybody, but I know it's going to appeal to a lot, and I hope it does to you. And I hope to catch you here again next time. Until next time, it's Sam Alford saying see ya.